The cantina's air hung thick with smoke and the metallic temps of recycled atmosphere. In the deepest corner, where the station's artificial lights barely reached, Kextar nursed his drink like it held the secrets of the universe. His massive frame filled the booth, scaled hide scarred by decades of warfare. 3 amber eyes gazed into the swirling liquid, each one telling its own story of horror. The sounds of the cantina washed over him, alien voices mixing languages, the clink of glasses, the hum of life support systems, but Kextar heard none of it. He was lost in memories that refused to fade, trapped in moments that played endlessly behind his eyes. A shadow fell across his table. He didn't look up, but his middle eye tracked the movement while the other 2 remained fixed on his drink. The newcomer was young, eager, with the soft look of someone who had never seen real combat. Her uniform was crisp, her recording equipment top of the line. Everything about her screamed academic. "You're Kextar," she said, sliding into the seat across from him, former commander of the Vraxian 5th Fleet. His translator crackled with interference, making his voice sound even more gravelly. "That title died with the war. Now I'm just another drunk alien in a forgotten cantina." She placed her hands flat on the table, leaning forward with the intensity only researchers possessed. "The Coalition archives are incomplete. We need first-hand accounts of the human conflict. Your service record shows you fought in over 30 major engagements." Kextar's claws scraped against the metal surface, leaving small scratches. "The Coalition won. We conquered Earth, absorbed their colonies, integrated their survivors. History is written by the victors. What more could you possibly need to know? Because something doesn't add up." She activated a small holographic display, showing star charts and battle statistics. Humans had inferior technology, smaller fleets, weaker industrial capacity. By every military analysis, the war should have lasted 2 years, not 12. We lost more ships and personnel than any previous campaign. The veteran finally looked up, all 3 eyes focusing on her with predatory intensity. "You want to know why it took 12 years to defeat a species that could barely reach the nearest star system when we first encountered them?" She nodded, placing her recorder between them. The device's soft blue light cast eerie shadows across Kextar's scarred features. "Fine." He drained his glass in one gulp, the alcohol burning down his throat. "But understand this, some knowledge comes with a price. When you hear what I'm about to tell you, you'll carry it forever. It'll change how you see warfare, how you understand what beings are capable of when they're truly desperate." The cantina seemed to grow quieter around them, as if the very station was listening. Kextar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing her to lean closer. "I was a fresh commander then, promoted after our victory against the Zephyrian Confederacy. Thought I understood combat, strategy, the art of war. The humans were supposed to be easy, a quick campaign to secure mining rights in their outer colonies." His eyes grew distant, staring through her into the past. "Proxima Station was our first real engagement. Intelligence said it was a mining outpost, maybe 500 civilians, minimal defensive capabilities. We approached with 4 heavy cruisers and a full fighter squadron. Standard intimidation tactics show overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept their inevitable submission." Kextar's claws drummed against the table in a nervous rhythm. "But as we entered the system, something felt wrong. No panicked transmissions, no evacuation ships fleeing, just silence. Then their defensive platforms came online, makeshift weapons cobbled together from mining equipment, but positioned with tactical precision." The historian's recorder captured every word as Kextar continued. "That's when we met Deho, his fighter launched alone from the station's docking bay. 1 ship against our entire squadron. Our pilots laughed over the comm channels, making jokes about human stupidity. The laughter stopped when he opened fire. That ancient human fighter moved like nothing we'd ever seen. Deho flew through our formation like he was dancing, targeting weak points our own engineers didn't know existed. He took out 3 of our fighters before we even realized what was happening." Kextar's voice grew hoarse with emotion. "But it was what happened. Next that changed everything. Deho's ship took a direct hit from our flagship's main cannon. Hull breach, engines failing, life support failing. Any rational pilot would have ejected, tried to survive. Instead he accelerated, pushed his dying ship faster, straight toward our command vessel. Our captain was screaming orders, trying to target him, but Deho was already committed. He rammed his fighter directly into our shield generator array at full speed. The cantina's ambient noise seemed to fade as Kextar spoke. The explosion tore through 3 decks. Our shields collapsed, leaving us vulnerable. But more than that, it sent a message. This human, this single pilot, had chosen certain death over surrender, not for glory, not for strategy, but for something we couldn't understand. That's when I realized we weren't fighting ordinary soldiers. We were fighting something entirely different. Something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. The amber liquid in Kekstar's glass trembled as his claws tightened around it. The cantina's dim lighting cast long shadows across his scarred face. But his 3 eyes burned with the intensity of someone reliving their worst nightmare. After Proxima Station, High Command thought they understood the human threat. They assigned me to the Kepler-7 operation with explicit orders. Make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happens when you resist the coalition. He took a shuddering breath. Kepler-7 was perfect for their purposes. A small mining colony on the edge of human space, far from their main fleets. 3,000 souls, mostly families, of miners and engineers. The historian watched as Kekstar's massive form seemed to shrink into itself. We brought everything: orbital bombardment platforms, ground assault, mechs, atmospheric fighters, enough firepower to glass a small moon. The humans had nothing. No fleet, no defensive satellites, just a handful of security guards and some converted mining ships. Admiral Vorth was commanding the operation. Typical coalition thinking: quick, overwhelming victory to break human morale. He opened communications with the colony and gave them the standard ultimatum. 12 hours to surrender unconditionally or face total annihilation. Kekstar's eyes unfocused, staring into the past. I was monitoring their communications, expecting panic, chaos, maybe desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, there was this strange calm. They were organizing, preparing, but not running, not begging, just ... ready. Their military commander was a human female named Misu. According to our intelligence, she was a former mining engineer who had joined their planetary defense force only 3 years earlier. She had maybe 200 actual soldiers. The rest were civilians with basic training. Their weapons were outdated projectile rifles and converted industrial equipment. The veteran's claws scraped against the table as he continued. Any reasonable commander would have tried to negotiate, maybe evacuate the non-combatants, preserve what they could. Misan's response came exactly 12 hours later. 3 words that would echo through the entire war. He paused, the memory still painful after all these years. Come and take it. Admiral Vorth was furious. He ordered immediate bombardment, but Misan's people were already moving. They had turned those mining tunnels into a fortress network. Every shaft, every cavern, every processing chamber became a defensive position. They knew we'd come for them, and they were ready. The cantina's background noise faded as other patrons unconsciously leaned closer, drawn by the veteran's haunted tone. We attacked at dawn, ship time, 3 waves of atmospheric fighters, followed by drop pods carrying our best assault troops. I was leading the second wave, confident this would be over in hours. Kekstar's laugh was bitter, hollow. The humans let us land, actually let us establish a beachhead before they opened fire. That's when we discovered what they had done. Those mining lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, had been reconfigured as anti-personnel weapons. Plasma cutters became sniper rifles. Industrial haulers became armored vehicles. They had turned their entire colony into a weapon. But it was the people that shocked us most. A young human named Hajin, barely past adolescence by their standards, held off an entire squad of our warriors with nothing but an industrial plasma cutter. He had positioned himself in a narrow tunnel, using the confined space to negate our numerical advantage. For 6 hours, he held that position alone. Kekstar's voice grew thick with emotion. When we finally overran his position, we found him, still at his post, wounded, exhausted, but still fighting. The tunnel walls around him were scarred black from plasma fire, and there were 17 of our soldiers who would never see home again. The battle raged for 3 days. Every meter cost us blood. But what haunts me most wasn't the fighting, it was what happened between the battles. The humans were evacuating their non-combatants through the deep mining tunnels, trying to get them to the far side of the colony where emergency ships waited. I watched through my battlescope as human soldiers carried wounded civilians through active combat zones, not just their own wounded, anyone who couldn't walk. Children, elderly, even some of our captured personnel. They moved in small groups, always under fire, always in danger. There was this medic, a female named Somin. She couldn't have been more than 25 standard years, but she moved through that battlefield like she owned it. Every time a habitat dome got hit, every time civilians were trapped, she went in. Not once, not twice, but dozens of times. Kekstar's voice cracked with remembered anguish. The final evacuation was from Habitat Complex 7. The structure was burning, supports failing, plasma fires spreading through the corridors. Our sensors showed at least 30 humans trapped inside, including several children. So-min went in alone. We watched her on thermal imaging moving through smoke and flames, carrying out survivors one by one. First the children, then the elderly, then the wounded. Each trip more dangerous than the last as the building collapsed around her. She made 17 trips into that burning hell. 17 times she risked everything for people she might not have even known. On the 18th trip, the main support beam finally gave way. The entire structure came down with her inside. The historian felt tears she didn't know she was capable of shedding. We pulled her body from the rubble 2 days later. Still had her medical kit in her hands. Still trying to help someone even as the building collapsed. Kexter drained his glass with a violent motion. We took the colony, achieved our tactical objectives. But standing in those ruins, looking at what we had done, what we had destroyed, for the first time in my military career, victory felt like defeat. We had won the battle, but we had lost something far more important. Something I still can't name, even now. The silence stretched between them as Kexter stared at his empty glass. His massive hands shook slightly as he reached for the bottle, amber liquid sloshing as he poured. The cantina's other patrons had moved away, sensing the darkness radiating. From their corner booth, Terra Nova, he whispered, the name carrying weight like a curse. 6 months after Kepler 7 High Command decided to escalate, they wanted to break human morale completely, so they targeted their agricultural worlds, cut off their food supply, force mass starvation, make surrender the only option. The historian's recorder captured every tremor in his voice as continued. Terra Nova was perfect for their plan. Peaceful farming world, minimal defenses, population scattered across rural settlements. Intelligence said it would be a clean operation: land, secure the food production facilities, relocate the population to containment zones. I was leading Assault Group 7, 5,000 of the Coalition's best shock troops. We had full orbital support, atmospheric dominance, advanced combat mechs. The humans had harvest festivals and grain silos. His laugh was bitter, hollow, should have been over in 6 hours. Kextar's scarred features twisted as the memories flooded back. We detected their evacuation ships 3 days before the assault. Civilian transports heading for the outer colonies, packed with refugees. But our sensors showed something strange. The ships were only half full. Thousands of humans were choosing to stay behind. Command assumed it was the usual essential personnel, security forces, maybe some stubborn farmers who didn't want to abandon their land. We were wrong, so very wrong. The veterans' 3 eyes focused on different points in space, as if watching the battle unfold again. The drop pods hit dirt at 0600 local time. Perfect insertion, no resistance, textbook operation. We secured our landing zones and began advancing toward the primary settlements. That's when we encountered our first offensive position. It was a small farming community called Haven Valley, maybe 200 people normally, but our thermal scanners showed only 50 heat signatures. The settlement was built around a central square, surrounded by grain silos and processing buildings. Simple, peaceful, defenseless. Except it wasn't defenseless anymore. Kextar's claws drummed against the table in an agitated rhythm. They had turned those grain silos into sniper nests, the processing buildings into bunkers. Farm equipment had been converted into weapons. Threshing machines became automated turrets. Irrigation systems became defensive barriers. But it was their leader that caught our attention. Hygiene was her name. According to our intelligence, she was a retired teacher, 63 standard years old, spent her whole life growing food and raising children. She should have been in the evacuation ships, safe in some distant colony. Instead, she was coordinating the defense of Haven Valley with nothing but hunting rifles and agricultural equipment. The cantina's air seemed to thicken as Kextar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We surrounded the settlement at dawn. Standard procedure: loudspeakers demanding surrender, promise of safe relocation, threats of overwhelming force. If they resisted, Hygiene's response came over their emergency broadcast system. She spoke in perfect galactic standard, no translator static, no fear in her voice. Said they weren't soldiers, weren't warriors, just farmers and teachers and shop owners. But this was their home, their world, their life's work. If we wanted it, we'd have to take it from their dead hands. The assault began at 0800 we expected. Token resistance, maybe a few wild shots before they surrendered. Instead, We walked into a killing field designed by people who knew every inch of their home ground. Kexter's hands clenched into fists, his voice growing hoarse with emotion. The main street became a death trap. They had positioned themselves in windows, on rooftops, behind farm equipment, creating overlapping fields of fire. Every step forward cost us blood. But there was this one intersection, the heart of their defense. A young human named Junho had set up position there with an ancient projectile rifle, something his grandfather might have used. He was maybe 25 years old, probably taught school children or fixed farming equipment before the war. But he held that intersection like he was born to it. For 3 hours, Junho fought off entire squads of coalition troops, not with superior weapons or advanced tactics, but with pure determination and intimate knowledge of his battlefield. He used drainage ditches for cover, ricocheted shots off metal surfaces to hit targets around corners, even threw farming tools as distractions. When we finally brought in the heavy mechs to flush him out, he adapted, started targeting their sensor arrays with precise shots, blinding our war machines. It took a direct hit from a plasma cannon to finally silence that ancient rifle. The historian felt her throat tighten. What happened when you reached his position? We found him still at his post, rifle in his hands, surrounded by empty ammunition casings. His left leg was shattered, probably happened hours earlier from shrapnel. Medical scanners showed he'd been fighting with internal bleeding, broken ribs, and a concussion. But he never retreated, never called for help, never stopped firing. Kextar's voice cracked with barely contained anguish. That's when I understood what we were really fighting. Not soldiers, not warriors in any sense, we recognized. These were ordinary people who had become extraordinary through sheer force of will, but the worst was yet to come. As we advanced through the settlement, we started finding their wounded. In any rational military operation, injured personnel are evacuated to safety, treated by medical teams, kept alive to fight another day. The humans did the opposite. There was this female, Haywan was her name. She'd taken shrapnel from one of our mortar rounds, internal bleeding that should have put her in critical care. Instead, she crawled 2 kilometers through hostile territory to reach the next settlement, dragged herself through drainage ditches, across open fields, through our patrol routes. When we found her 12 hours later, she was still transmitting, still calling in our positions, our troop movements, our tactical deployments. Still fighting with her last breath to protect people she'd never met in places she'd never see again. The cantina had fallen completely silent now, other patrons unconsciously drawn to the veterans' testimony. By dawn, Haven Valley was ours, 50 humans against 5,000 coalition troops, and we had technically won. But standing in that settlement, looking at what remained, I felt like we had lost something fundamental, something that made victory taste like ashes. Kexter drained his glass in one gulp, the alcohol burning down his throat like liquid fire. Those human faces, even in death, they looked peaceful, not defeated, not broken, like they had accomplished something we couldn't measure with body counts or territory captured. That night I sent my first report back to command, told them we had secured the settlement, neutralized all resistance, achieved our tactical objectives, but I didn't tell them about the look in Hyjin's eyes when we found her body. I didn't mention how Junho smiled even as he died. I couldn't explain why victory felt like the greatest defeat of my career. Because that's when I realized we weren't just fighting humans. We were fighting something that couldn't be conquered, couldn't be broken, couldn't be defeated by any weapon in our arsenal. We were fighting the human spirit itself. The bottle was nearly empty now, its amber contents reflecting the cantina's flickering lights like liquid fire. Kexter's 3 eyes had grown dim with exhaustion and pain, but his voice carried the weight of absolute truth. New Soul Colony, he repeated, the words falling like stones into still water. 2 years into the war, Coalition High Command was getting desperate. The human resistance was spreading to other species, inspiring rebellion across the galaxy. They needed a decisive victory, something so overwhelming that it would break the human spirit forever. The historian's recorder hummed softly between them, capturing every nuance of the veteran's confession. Around them, the cantina had fallen into an unnatural quiet, as if the very walls were listening. They assembled the largest fleet in Coalition history, 300 capital ships, 5,000 fighters, orbital bombardment platforms capable of cracking moons. The humans had one colony world, 500,000 civilians, and a planetary defense force that wouldn't have challenged a merchant convoy 6 months earlier. Kextar's claws traced invisible patterns on the scarred table surface. New Soul was humanity's cultural heart. their museums, their universities, their centers of learning. Beautiful city, all gleaming towers and floating gardens, the kind of place that made you believe in civilization. Admiral Vexerin was commanding the operation. He'd fought against the crystalline hegemony, the Voidwalkers, the Machine Collective. Never lost a campaign, never met resistance he couldn't crush. He gave the humans 72 hours to evacuate civilians and surrender the planet. The veterans' voice grew thick with memory. The human response came exactly 72 hours later, not from their planetary governor, not from their civilian leadership, from their military commander, a male named Wujin, former engineering professor, called up when the war started. No formal military training, no combat experience, just a teacher who'd learned to fight. His message was broadcast on all frequencies, sent to every ship in our fleet, 23 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Every street will cost you blood, every building will be paid for in bodies. Come and claim your victory. Kekstar's hands trembled as he continued. Admiral Vexerin was furious. He ordered immediate orbital bombardment, wanted to turn the entire city into glass, but Coalition Command had other plans. They wanted the city intact, wanted to make it a symbol of human defeat, so we went in the hard way. The assault began. At dawn, ship time, wave after wave of drop pods, atmospheric fighters, assault mechs. I was leading the third wave, expecting to land in a pacified city. Instead, we dropped into hell. The cantina's air seemed to thicken as Kekstar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The humans had turned New Seoul into a fortress. Every building was a strongpoint, every street a killing field. They'd spent months preparing, turning their beautiful city into a weapon designed to bleed us dry. But it wasn't the fortifications that shocked us, it was the people. We expected to fight soldiers, maybe some militia. Instead, we found an entire population that had become an army. Teachers manning heavy weapons, doctors building explosives, children running messages through combat zones. There was this boy, Minho was his name. Couldn't have been more than 14 standard years, probably studied music or mathematics before the war. But he was coordinating evacuation routes for the entire southern district, using nothing but a handheld communicator, and intimate knowledge of the city's layout. Kekstar's voice grew hoarse with emotion. I watched him through my scope as plasma fire lit up the sky around him, buildings exploding, debris falling like rain, our fighters screaming overhead. But this child never flinched, never ran. He guided civilian groups through the chaos, always one step ahead of our advance forces. For 3 days, Minho kept those evacuation routes open. When we finally cornered him in an abandoned school, he was still transmitting coordinates, still saving. Livs found him at his post with a smile on his face, surrounded by children's drawings on the walls. The historian felt tears she didn't know she was capable of shedding. How long did the fighting last? For months, Kekstar replied, his voice hollow. For months of the most brutal urban combat in galactic history. Every block was a battle, every room a war zone. The humans had prepared for everything, hidden weapons, caches, underground tunnels, supply lines that defied our intelligence networks. But what broke us wasn't their tactics or their weapons, it was their medics. There was this human female Yunji. She'd been a pediatric surgeon before the war, specialized in treating sick children. When the fighting started, she set up a field hospital in the old subway tunnels beneath the city. Nothing fancy, just surgical tables made from subway benches and medical supplies salvaged from bombed hospitals for 6 weeks. She treated anyone who came to her. Human soldiers, alien prisoners, wounded civilians, didn't matter. If you were bleeding, she'd try to save you. I know because 3 of my own squad members ended up on her table after a tunnel collapse. Kekstar's 3 eyes closed simultaneously, the memory too painful to witness. She worked 20-hour days in those tunnels, performing surgery by flashlight, using improvised tools and expired medicines. The city was collapsing around her, but she never stopped working, never stopped saving lives. When our final assault reached the subway level, we found her still at her post. The tunnel ceiling was cracking, debris falling like snow, but she was operating on a wounded coalition soldier, one of ours. Her hands were steady, her voice calm, even as the world ended around her. The ceiling finally gave way as we watched. Tons of concrete and steel came down, sealing the tunnel forever. But in those final moments, as the darkness closed in, she was still working, still fighting death itself with nothing but skill and determination. The cantina had fallen completely silent now, every patron unconsciously drawn to the veteran's testimony. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted. as if the station itself was holding its breath. "We took New Seoul," Kekstar whispered, his voice cracking with barely contained anguish. "Raised our flags over the ruins, declared victory to the galaxy, but the cost." He shook his head, unable to continue for a moment. "For every human we killed, we lost 3 of our own. Streets that should have taken hours to secure took days. Buildings that should have fallen in minutes became week-long sieges. The humans turned their city into a graveyard that swallowed entire armies. But the worst part wasn't the casualties or the time. It was the realization that we hadn't really won anything. We'd conquered a pile of rubble, claimed dominion over ruins and graves. The real victory, the human spirit, their culture, their refusal to submit, that we could never touch." Kekstar drained the last drops from his glass, the amber liquid, burning like liquid fire. Standing in the wreckage of New Seoul, surrounded by the dead, I understood something that would haunt me forever. We had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, every advantage warfare could provide. But the humans had something we couldn't measure, couldn't counter, couldn't defeat. They had turned their love for each other into a weapon more powerful than any gun, more devastating than any bomb. And in trying to destroy it, we had only made it stronger. The empty bottle stood between them like a monument to pain, its amber contents long since consumed. Kekstar's massive frame seemed smaller, now, as if the weight of his memories had physically diminished him. His 3 eyes, once bright with the fire of a warrior, now held only the hollow ache of understanding that came too late. 15 years, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the cantina's ambient hum. 15 years since the war ended, and I still wake up screaming their names: Daeho, Misun, Junho, Yunji. Humans I killed, humans I killed, humans who taught me what it truly means to fight for something greater than yourself. The historian's recorder continued its silent vigil, capturing every word of the veteran's final confession. She had come seeking military data, tactical analysis, strategic insights. Instead, she had found something far more valuable and infinitely more terrifying. "You want to know what made humans so dangerous?" Kekstar's claws traced the bottle's smooth surface. "Every military analyst in the galaxy got it wrong. They studied human weapons, their ship designs, their battle formations. All of it meaningless. The real weapon was something we couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't understand until it was too late." He reached into his jacket with trembling hands, producing a small, battered device no larger than his palm. The metal casing was scorched, the screen cracked, but it still hummed with dormant energy. This belonged to a human prisoner named Dongmin, and captured him during the final assault on New Seoul. 3rd-degree plasma burns, internal bleeding, probably hours from death. But he wouldn't break. Kekstar's voice grew thick with memory. Standard interrogation protocols failed completely. Pain didn't work. He'd already endured more than most beings could survive. Threats were useless. He was already dying. So I tried a different approach. Started talking to him like a person instead of an enemy. That's when I learned about Sujin, his mate of 20 years. About their daughter who wanted to be a teacher, their son who dreamed of exploring distant stars. Dongmin carried their pictures into battle, along with handwritten letters and children's drawings. Carried his entire world with him wherever he went. The device activated at Kekstar's touch, its cracked screen flickering to life. Soft voices filled the air, human voices speaking words of love, hope, and goodbye. These are personal messages, recovered from destroyed human positions. Soldiers recording final words for families they'd never see again. Love letters written in foxholes. Children's drawings carried across the galaxy into battle. A young female voice emerged from the speakers, speaking in accented galactic standard. "Mom, if you're hearing this, then I didn't make it home. But I want you to know that every day I fought, I carried your smile with me. Every enemy I faced, I remembered your strength. You taught me that love is stronger than fear, and I proved it true among the stars." The historian felt tears streaming down her face as more voices joined the chorus. Fathers speaking to unborn children, mothers singing lullabies to babies they'd left behind, lovers promising to find each other in whatever comes after death. Every human fighter carried something like this, Kekstar continued, his own voice breaking. They weren't just soldiers, they were fathers, mothers, children, lovers, each one fighting not for conquest or glory, but for the people they'd left behind. We fought for the coalition, for orders, for duty, but humans, they fought for love. The veteran's 3 eyes closed as another message played, a child's voice, bright with innocence. "Daddy, I drew you a picture of our house. When you come home, we'll put it on the refrigerator, like always. Mummy says you're fighting bad aliens, But I know you'll win because you're the strongest daddy in the universe. That's what made them unstoppable, Kexter whispered. Not their weapons or their courage, though they had both in abundance. It was that they made war into something sacred. Every battlefield became hallowed ground because someone they loved was worth dying for. He stood slowly, his massive frame unfolding like a mountain rising from the earth. The device remained on the table, still playing its chorus of human voices, a symphony of love carried across the darkness of space. You asked why it took 12 years to defeat them, because we weren't just fighting an army. We were fighting every human who ever loved someone enough to die for them, every mother who kissed her child goodbye, every father who promised to return home, every lover who swore to find each other again among the stars. We thought we were conquering a species. We were actually fighting the concept of love itself. Kex walked toward the cantina's exit, his footsteps heavy with the weight of understanding. At the doorway he paused, his scarred features illuminated by the station's artificial starlight. The Coalition won the war, he said, his voice carrying across the silent cantina. We conquered their worlds, absorbed their colonies, integrated their survivors into our empire. Victory was complete, total, undeniable. But the humans, they won something else entirely. Something that can never be conquered, never be destroyed, never be forgotten. They proved that love could stand against the darkness of space itself. That ordinary people could become extraordinary through the simple act of caring more about others than themselves. Every night I hear their voices, not in anger or hatred, but in love, calling out to families they'll never see again, promising children they'll never hold, declaring devotion to lovers who died light years away. The most beautiful and terrible sound in the universe. The door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the historian alone with the weight of his testimony. The device continued playing its endless chorus of human voices, soldiers, civilians, children, grandparents, all united by the simple, devastating power of love. She reached for the recorder, preparing to end the session, but stopped as a new voice emerged from the speakers, an elderly human male, his words carrying the weight of a lifetime. To whoever finds this recording, know that we did not die in vain. We died for something greater than ourselves, something worth preserving. Across the vastness of space and time, we died for love, and in dying we made it immortal. The historian sat in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the voices of the dead, finally understanding what Kextar had tried to tell her. The war had ended 15 years ago, but its true legacy lived on in every act of love, every moment of sacrifice, every person willing to stand against the darkness for someone else. The humans had lost the war but won something infinitely more valuable. They had proven that love, not conquest, was the most powerful force in the universe. And that lesson, carried in the voices of the dead, would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. The end.